The most dreaded section when I was preparing for my IELTS exam was the writing section. There was no way to assess whether what I was doing was correct. It gives you your score. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I was making a video on how I scored a CLB level 10 in my IELTS exam, but I did not save some parts of the video. So here's this video in two different locations where I share my experiences of how I scored a CLB level 10 on my IELTS general exam just with 1 month of preparation. So here's my IELTS scorecard where I scored CLB level 10 in general exam. Before you start preparing, you have to understand the scoring description. For this, you can Google Canada.ca plus CLB, Canadian Language Benchmark, and scroll down to the IELTS section. To score the highest level, you have to score a CLB 10. Now, there is a difference between the IELTS, which has only 9 bands, and CLB, the Canadian Language Benchmark, which has 10 bands. As they say, the highest score or the golden score required for IELTS is 8,777, where in listening you just score 8, and in all the other 3 sections, reading, writing, and speaking, you just score 7. Now, if you want to see what difference a CLB 9 versus a CLB 10 makes, you have to go to the CRS calculator and check out the difference yourself. However, as a mature applicant, you need a higher CRS score, and a CLB 10 can give you those additional points by just answering a few more questions correctly. If we look at the differences between CLB 9 and CLB 10, we can see there is a half point difference in the listening section, 1 point difference in the reading section, half a point difference in the writing section, and again half point difference in the speaking section. Now, if you are a mature applicant, I presume that you already are working in the industry and have some work experience. Speaking should not be that big of a problem. No, you can consistently try speaking on the relevant topics. You should look at the websites that I've mentioned in the description and look for the recent topics that they have discussed about. I think you should always have some answer prepared about your career, your education, your hobbies and interests. There are some basic rules, I would say, that leads you to a higher score. You should not be using very simple sentences. In day to day, you're talking with our friends, or even with our office colleagues, or when writing emails, we just use very plain, simple sentences. We don't use linking words like however, so as to. However, the IELTS exam tests you on the complexity of sentences that you choose or that you speak or that you write in your day-to-day languages. Not only is the complexity an important part, but you get assessed on the kind of vocabulary that you have. Gone are those days when back in school we used to write those essays with a good vocabulary. But what I have done for my IELTS exam, and this will help you going forward as well once you have moved as an international student, but whenever you are planning to take those IELTS exam again in the future. I've maintained a small notebook which I call my Spellwell book, and it has all the vocabulary for different topics. So I have some catchphrases for education, for arts, for social media, for internet, globalization, sports. When you're using those heavy words, because the examiner really wants to listen to all those heavy vocabulary that you're using and not just plain vanilla language, so they get more impressed about it. And if you look at the scoring sheet, you can see higher weightage is given to the people who are using complex sentence structure and a better vocabulary. Coming back to the listening section, these are the main mistakes that you should be aware of when you are preparing for your listening exam. There are so many practice videos available on YouTube that can be used. However, the main mistakes are these. Now, one of the common listening mistakes is that we lose focus when you are unable to find an answer and you get distracted. The problem with this is that if you are not able to find a particular answer, then you get kind of stuck on it, and by doing that you lose track of whatever is being said later on, which hampers your scores on the following question. That's mistake number one, that don't lose focus. If you are not able to find an answer, make an educated guess, but keep listening to what is being said and find the relevant answers to those questions. The second mistake is when the speaker tries to hide the answer by using those distractors. So first they will say about, I wanted to book a hotel room for 2 people, but then in the second line they talk about that they wanted to book a hotel for 3 people but on a particular date. Be aware of any such changes that are happening. This is especially a very valid case when there are MCQs. Might make a mistake here. The third common mistake is, when we don't follow the instructions. Now, the instruction says that no more than 2 words. So, instead of writing the world, you write across the globe. Now, while the meaning is the same, but you've not followed the instructions, and then you lose marks. The fourth common mistake is a very silly mistake, which are usually your spelling mistakes, your grammar mistakes, or the pronouns. It might say that there were books kept on the table, but you just wrote book. So that's where that's a very common silly mistake where people lose marks in listening. Another very silly mistake is when you skip a blank. So say for example you did not know the answer to a particular question, and you did not skip that question, but you kept answering to the next question in sequence. Doing this can just hamper your exam completely. So if you don't know an answer, if you cannot make a wild guess, just leave that question blank, or just leave that, underline that question, make a circle that you have not answered this question, so that you don't mess up the remaining questions. Now the tips that I would suggest for the listening section are as follows. You have ample time before the listening starts. When you get the paper, glance through the questions first. So when you glance through the questions, you have a fair bit of idea as what are the answers that you should be listening more intentionally about. The second is that you have to highlight the instructions properly, especially when it says no more than 2 words, in 1 word only. That's something which is very important. Then then you have to look for the clues. So say for example the question says that about date. So as soon as they talk about the date, that you have to, if an entire sentence is being said, what you have to focus more on is the date when it comes up. Another thing is that whenever you're reading those questions, if you can underline or highlight something which the question particularly talks about, so you exactly know that it's not a general conversation, but you are listening to someone with the intent of finding an answer to those highlighted words. Another session is that you should always use your pencil, because if you've made any changes, it's always easy to go back and just erase the answer. I wrote pen and paper exams, so I always ensured that I give my answers in all capital letters, and goes without saying, if you have time, please go ahead and revise the answers before submitting. Now coming to the reading section, there are mostly 3 sections with about 700 words each, and with increasing complexity. There are about 13 to 14 questions that you have to answer. The most common mistakes which even I made while taking those practice exams were like, first important thing is you're not allowed to transfer answers, so you don't get any extra time, right? So that's number one. Again, the same thing, going back to the listening section, you ignore the instructions, and the question asks you to find something plural or something that got changed during the reading passage, but then you were stuck to the first description and answered incorrectly. Another common mistake is that when you don't choose the correct number of answers. So say for example they ask you to choose 2 options. It typically happens for multiple choice questions, but you just selected one, so then you lose your marks there. There's again a difference between a true and a false versus a yes and a no. So a true and a false, you have to check more videos, you have to do practice sessions that if it's a fact, then it's a true. Another common mistake is that you read the entire passage. You don't have to read the entire passage. You always must read the questions first, and then just skim through the passage to find where those keywords appear, to find the answer. Another mistake is that you ignore the order of the questions. Now, there are like 5 questions and they appear in an order. The first question will be from the first part of the paragraph of the reading passage, and then so on and so forth. So if you are on, say, a 5th question, you will find the answer to that question towards the end of the passage, so you don't have to waste time and going ahead of the passage in the beginning of the passage and then try looking for that answer. It will not be there, so don't waste your time. The questions will appear in the order of the passage. Another mistake is that you get trapped in some vocabulary which is like unknown to you completely. There have been cases towards the 3rd reading passage, when you come across some scientific terms or some words that might not be known to you, but then you just have to make an educated guess to see what the whole paragraph's context is about, and then make your best guess. So again, to summarize, the tips for the reading section would be that you have to glance all the questions before you start reading the passage. You just have to skim the passage to understand what the basic idea, the core idea for that passage is, and then you have to just make those educated guesses instead of just leaving the question. You don't lose marks there. The other one is that time management is of utmost importance. There are times when when you find that the paragraph is a bit complicated. It has, of course, those complex structured sentences, and then you waste your time rereading the passage again. So however, you should try skimming through all the passage once, and find the answers that are readily available. And only if you were not able to find an answer because the passage was complicated, should you go back to that passage and reread it. Another tip is that you should eliminate the answers. There are times, and it has been very helpful if I was not able to find the correct answers, but say then there were 4 options. 2 of them, of course, were completely incorrect, so I eliminated those. The answer could have been for the other 2 options, and then your chances of getting or scoring on that question increases. The most dreaded section, when I was preparing for my IELTS exam, the most dreaded section was the writing section. It had been ages that I had written any essay. It was way back in college, or maybe just in school, when we had to write those lengthy essays. But to prepare for the IELTS exam, I went through the previous topics and started writing those essays. But there was no way to assess whether what I was doing was correct. So I came across a fantastic website. The link is there in the description. I started practicing my essays. It gives you score. I think you can make a free account for 3 days, and then you can probably you use your different email IDs to access the website. It gives you your score. What I also did was, when I wrote those essays, I had a timer set, and towards the end, it gives us an option, as to what went wrong, what did we miss, and it's like an instant feedback that you receive. It always makes a lot of sense that you copy paste whatever essay that you have typed in your repository. So I had a free Grammarly account where I put in all these essays and put in my score along with it as well. And when the time came for me to practice again, it was easy for me to go back to all these essays, or I had understanding of how to structure my sentences, how to move different paragraphs and score high. Thank you, and that's all for now. I look out for other videos as well, where I share detailed steps of how I applied for universities. Thank you, and stay tuned. Bye bye.